Welcome to City Talk, a weekly conversation produced by the City of Waco to inform you about city events and projects. Each week, we'll bring you interesting topics with city staff and community leaders to highlight how Waco is an exciting place to live and work.
Hi, Waco. I'm Sierra Shipley, the Public Information Officer for the Waco Police Department, and I have two guests here with me. We have Officer Garen Bynum with our Traffic Unit and Detective Kevin Spicer with our Crimes Against Children Unit, and we're here to talk about school safety. School's back in session. At least some districts have started, and we got more starting next week. So we have a lot to talk about as far as safety goes with these kids and school zones and things like that. But I want to kick it off with you, Detective, about some things that might tick up during this year. I know you said that there were a lot more cases that might become open because of people reporting abuse.
Yeah, we get a lot of cases reported to our department by mandatory reporters like teachers, counselors within these school districts. Whenever the kids go back to school, that's whenever they have the interactions with these mandatory reporters, and they make outcries about things that might have happened to them while they were at home over the summer. And once those tips come in from CPS, that's where they're originally called into, they get sent to our department, and then we look into them. So we actually open a lot of cases that come in from that route. So yeah, this time of year they increase a lot. Back when the pandemic started, for example, last year, and all the schools shut down, our caseload dropped because we were not getting all these referrals from the mandatory reporters. So it's a good thing to think that your caseload for crimes against children would drop, but when you realize the reason why it dropped, and that these kids were just stuck at home, possibly getting abused, and that stuff wasn't being addressed by law enforcement, it was concerning. But yeah, we at this time of year, we always anticipate a spike in our caseload because of this type of stuff.
Yeah, can you explain that proper protocol of someone that needed to report something like that?
If anybody, not just mandatory reporters, but if anybody believes that there's a child being abused, whether it be physical abuse, sexual abuse, or even malnourishment, maybe poor living conditions, you can call CPS hotlines, and that stuff gets forwarded to the proper channels of law enforcement.
Yeah, so in this sense, school is really important to these kids in a number of ways that isn't just learning, but for things like this to be reported. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like a safety network as well.
Yeah, and so now on top of that, the biggest thing that we always like to talk about is just school zone safety as well. When kids, before and after school, there's a lot of kids walking around the area. And so, Officer Bynum, tell me a little bit what drivers can do to just prevent anything from happening.
So the biggest thing, obviously, every school zone has posted school zone signs, right, where that speed limit slows down. In most cases, it slows down to 20 miles an hour. For the posted speed limit. But here's what people don't realize, all right? We have school zones all across the city of Waco, literally from, the La Vega area all the way out to Midway ISD. I mean, it stretches throughout the entire city. But there's also private schools that have school zones as well. So people think that these school zone signs that are posted, they always have flashing lights, but that's not necessarily the case. A lot of our private schools don't have flashing lights on their school zone signs. Some other ones like La Vega, they're quite a ways out there. They don't have flashing lights on theirs. So what that means is we need drivers to really pay attention. We need them to really look at the signs. They're there for a reason. You're asked to slow down for a reason. It's because there is an increase in pedestrian traffic. And a lot of kids in the area, especially kids that live close to those schools, they'll walk to school. So it's there for the kids' safety, as well as parents and kids, parents that are walking their kids to school. So, we really need people to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and can we talk about some of those repercussions that if you do speed in a school zone, and I know a lot of those signs we see that, cell phone use absolutely prohibited in those areas. So talk about a little bit of, what could happen with the driver if they're caught doing any of those things.
So just like, Crimes Against Children Unit sees a spike in their caseload, when school zone starts, the traffic unit, the Waco Police Department traffic unit, we also see a spike in our enforcement actions as well. So we go out and we specifically, I don't want to say the word target, but we go out into these school zones and do enforcement both in the mornings and in the afternoons throughout the city. So there's only 5 of us, so we have to make our rounds. But but we definitely make our rounds to every school zone that we can. And with that, if we do stop you, then you're absolutely subject to receive a citation for whatever that violation is. Most common is speeding, obviously. But in the last couple of years, we have seen a spike in cell phone usage and things like that. So.
And let's talk about school buses as well. There's certain times when you need to stop, and there's certain times where you just need to use caution. So let's start with just like a 2-lane road.
Yeah.
Who needs to stop when?
So if you see the school bus stopped, right, and their flashing lights are on, they're always going to have, that stop sign that'll fold out. Both sides of the road stop. The vehicles that are behind the school bus obviously will stop, but also the cars that are passing going the opposite direction need to stop as well. And that's for the safety of the kids. I can't tell you how many wrecks the police department has worked over the years where, a kid was trying to cross over the street and somebody was just not paying attention or didn't care to stop. And kids have gotten hit, parents have gotten hit, things like that. So there's a reason why those laws are in place, and it's to keep, our most valued asset, our kids, safe. And that's the goal of that.
Yeah. And what would you say if now we're on a maybe shared median? Who needs to stop then?
Both sides of the road. Yeah, it's always.
Yeah, absolutely. You're correct. The only time that a car doesn't need to stop traveling the opposite direction is when?
Say it one more time.
So when a car is traveling the opposite direction of the school bus and they need to use caution instead of stopping, when would that be?
A protected median.
That is correct. Very good. Little quiz for you for the day. I know.
No warning on that
I know. Sorry about that. Yeah. So the only time that, if you're a driver and you're driving the opposite of the school bus, you do only need to use caution when there's that protected median there.
And I can tell you, for all of us that are in the traffic unit, if we do end up stopping a vehicle that is not observing the stop rule there for the school buses, you're going to get a citation for that. It's not even going to be a warning. There's not going to be a conversation about it. It's going to be a ticket.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of things that parents can do to also help and teach their kids, the safety of schools, in and outside of schools, and walking to school, all sorts of things. So, Detective, let's talk about social media. A lot of social media, kids use social media all over. Social media has grown so much.
Right.
So what's probably some tips that you could give to parents who have their kids on social media? They know they're on those different types of websites.
Monitor it. We actually get a lot of cases from parents when they report what they found on their kids' social media. Social media is something that's not going to go away, and it seems like kids are getting it younger and younger now. Phones in general.
8 and 9 years old.
Right. So we get lots of cases that are reported to us from parents doing these random checks on their children's phones and social media accounts, and it's stuff that's inappropriate that gets reported to us, and we investigate it. We serve search warrants to Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok. I mean, all these companies we have law enforcement access to via search warrants, and we can get all that stuff and review what's on there and address it that way. And if it's a legit criminal offense, then we address it. Some of it's like inappropriate content, and then the more scary part is whenever predators out there use social media to try to contact these kids, and then either try to meet up with them or have them maybe send inappropriate content back to them as well.
Absolutely. So explain, you kind of touched on it, the dangers of social media, because anyone can be anyone when they're online.
Correct. You never know who you're really talking to out there. As a matter of fact, I recently worked a case where a guy lied about his name and his age, and he was a middle-aged male whenever he told this girl that he was 18. So it's scary. So my number one advice as a parent to a child would be to monitor it. If you allow them to even have it, monitor it.
And what are some type of tips that parents can give their kids about social media when they're on it, what they should look for, and maybe red flags?
Probably don't accept anything like friend requests, or don't communicate with people that you don't know is a real person. So if a child goes to school and they actually know all these other students who are in their class and stuff, then that's pretty safe. But it's whenever they start communicating with strangers and that they don't really know is a real person, and that's when it gets kind of risky.
So strangers, that's a big word that we always use. I know stranger danger. It's usually the common way that parents will let their kids know, like, hey, don't talk to anyone when you're walking to and from school. And a lot of kids, will ride the bus, walk to and from school that don't have parent supervision at all times. And either of you guys can answer this question, but what would you say parents should do as far as those kids who are walking to and from school?
Know the route. Know where your kids are, like what time they get out of school, and know their route home and to school if they're walking. When I was a kid, we actually had a code word. My mom told us that if somebody ever comes along saying that, that she sent them to come get us, or me and my brothers, like pick us up on the way home from school, to use a code word. Our code word was actually toothpick. So it's just something really random that only parents and their children would know.
Yeah, a code word is definitely a big thing. I remember when I was younger, I was given a code word. My school was just on like 2 streets down, and I would have a walkie-talkie. My mom would have one, and I would have one. And I would just, beep, I'm at school. And she'd be like, all right, thank you. And then I'd tell her walkie-talkie when I'm walking back from school. So always make sure, to give those routes. And another good thing that would be Officer Bynum, you can attest to this, is to make sure, the kids are crossing the streets in the correct way. Show them those correct routes.
Yeah. So, well, and that kind of goes back to having a plan, right? So before you even, before they start the school year, if they haven't yet, make sure that you walk that route with them, and that way they know where everything is at, what they should be seeing on the route, where they should be crossing, the safe places to cross. If there is especially outside of the schools, there are crossing guards that work in those areas. Utilize those crossing guards. They're there for the kids' safety. So make sure, as a parent, that you really communicate that to them. And actually, going back to what we were talking about in communication with the kids when they get home or something like that, I'll tell you some things that I do that works really well for us is my oldest son has a phone, so he can communicate that way. And when he gets home, he sends me a text and just lets me know that he's home. But my youngest son doesn't. My youngest son is 9 years old, so I don't feel it's appropriate for him to have a phone yet. And he actually, I have a camera inside the house, and he pushes the button on the camera and calls me on the camera and lets me know that he's home. And it's, those are things that parents can do that are actually very affordable now. Indoor cameras and outdoor cameras are something that you can buy at Walmart and Lowe's and Home Depot, and they work really well. They hook up to your internet, and like I said, they're fairly cheap and affordable. So
technology can be an amazing thing sometimes, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, let's also talk about school buses, I should say, is that if kids are riding the bus, a lot of parents, if they live 2 or 3 houses down, they just let their kid walk to the bus and wait for the bus by themselves. Would that be a smart thing to do?
what do you think?
Well, I mean, it could be risky for a lot of reasons. I realize a lot of parents don't have an option in that, but, there are predators out there, and that's just the nature of the beast. So, I mean, I have 2 daughters, and I would just be scared myself to do that with them. But like I said, sometimes there's not an option. Then again, there's also traffic safety that goes along with that. Standing on the side of the road could be risky. You get hit by a car or something like that.
That's really what we see is a lot of the school stops, like the school bus stops. 5 minutes before the bus gets there, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see a large number of kids standing in that location, but you'll also see those parents that take their kids to the bus stop. So you'll see an excess in cars parked on the side of the road and things like that. So whereas that's a good thing to have the parents drop them off, I like seeing that. Where the dangers come into play is when you get a group of kids all together, kids start horseplaying and things like that, and those cars actually become a visual block for kids that'll run out to the road because they're horseplaying and not paying attention. So whenever you see those kind of things, really slow down. Some of those areas are not the areas that there's going to be school zones. Those are going to be in the residential areas of the city that won't have that slowed down traffic enforcement there. So you really got to pay attention to where, when you see that kind of stuff start slowing down, and just prepare yourself for kids that aren't paying attention to you. So
yeah. Now, what about just a few houses down. If you're one or two houses down and the bus stop is right there, should parents, what if they're looking out the window watching their kid and maybe their kid gets abducted somehow? What do we do then?
I would immediately call the police if that happened. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
so try to get as much information as you can if you witness something like that. Car, color, license plate, suspect information, race, hair type, hair color, facial hair, all that stuff is really valuable whenever it comes to locating and trying to identify a suspect for something like that.
I would actually say, if you are just one or two houses down, step out there with your kid, right? Because, even at 20 feet away, sometimes parents have a hard time controlling their 10-year-old. And I don't, mean to sound mean when I say that, but that's just the nature of kids, right? But if you're standing right there with your kid, then you can cut down some of the horseplay. You can keep, some of those predators that they have to deal with. You can keep some of those guys away and let them know really quick that, this is not the place, right? So.
Now, we talked a lot about, dangers of school zones and things like that. Anything else you guys want to touch on that maybe we didn't cover yet before we kind of move on to maybe some more lighthearted stuff?
No.
No? Good? Okay. Good. Well, usually first day of school for our officers, it's kind of a fun time to be able to meet the kids, right? And welcome them back to school. I know for Waco ISD, we're going to be doing that. Is that correct?
I think so. That's what I've been told.
So tell me, what do you guys do usually on the first day of school for those kids?
We usually try, as far as the traffic unit goes, we're there in the school zones, and they see us coming day in and day out, and so we usually try to communicate with the kids, and even something as simple as just a wave and a hi, makes those kids feel good, just to let them know that we're there. In times in the past, and COVID shut down a lot for us, obviously, but times in the past, we've also throughout the year gone in and hung out with the kids and gone and had, we've had lunch with the kids and things. So that kind of stuff for us, just the community outreach aspect of it for us is a fun opportunity. And the goal there is to build trust in these kids, to let them know that they can trust the police and that we are a safe place that they can come to. So
yeah, of course. We just had our back to school bash where we gave over nearly 800 backpacks and there was a few thousand in attendance. It was a very big event, and that was just all for the kids to just kind of give them a little, encouragement, a little boost of happiness, because no kid likes to go back to school. And so just explain a little bit about, that community outreach and why it's so important, not just for the kids, but for our officers too.
Well, like I said, it gives the kids a chance to interact with a police officer, to let them know that, like I said, we are a safe place, to let them know that we're also real people, right? I know sometimes kids have a tendency, kids that don't know a police officer, on a day-to-day basis, they sometimes can hold us to, I don't want to say a higher standard, but they can hold us up there a little bit higher. They look up to us, that kind of thing. And so if we can get down on their level and get real with them and just build good, friendly interaction, then they won't be nervous to come to us, So it kind of lessens that nerve, issue there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I know as a detective, you're not usually always in uniform, but how is it with you when you get to interact with the community?
It's great. We don't really a lot in our unit. We're kind of behind the scenes, but it's great. And I love working with the kids, and I agree with Officer Bynum. It's very important that we let kids know that they can trust the police. And I enjoy the types of cases that I work because they're justifying. I mean, it gives you a good sense of accomplishment in doing what I do.
Absolutely. So with our few minutes left, let's go over some of the main things we talked about and touched on. First, just bullet points as we go through. So first, I want to take it back to you, Detective, is reporting cases. What can people do?
Just be aware of your surroundings and what's going on. You can report these types of cases in lots of different outlets, whether it be calling in anonymous tips to CPS, or if you're not concerned about being anonymous, you can even just come in to the police department, make a report. You can call and have the patrol officers come out to your house to make a report. So there's a lot of ways to make this stuff known to law enforcement. So I would just recommend that people be aware of what's going on. And if they see a child that they believe is being abused in any way, then it's better safe than sorry to let some authority know about it so it can be addressed.
Yeah, and those adults too, those mandatory reporters and maybe other people in those child's life, what should they do? Or what are those signs that maybe if that kid isn't speaking up, how can they maybe realize that something might be wrong?
So a good thing is, like, whenever these mandatory reporters, they have a relationship with these children and they know how they usually are, and then maybe if their behavior starts changing and maybe they start being quiet or they start having a lot of absences from school, that could be an indication that something may be going on at home. So that's the good part, is they can reach out to these kids and ask them if something's going on. It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah. And so, Officer Bynum, safety around school zones, what can people remember for those?
Slow down, 100% slow down. Like I said, we're not going to be able to be in every school zone at every, minute of the day. But I don't ask you to slow down because you could get a ticket. I ask you to slow down for the kids' safety, right? That's the number one goal there. So pay attention to where you're at, pay attention to your surroundings, put your cell phone down. Whatever distractions you have in the vehicle, just put them away. And pay attention while you're in the school zones. It only lasts 30 seconds, right? So we're asking you to just please be extra cautious and extra careful for 30 seconds of your life to get through the school zone safely, and then you can go on about your day.
Absolutely. A lot of us, we get pretty busy in the morning. We get rushed to work and things like that. So it kind of maybe skips our mind, or we think, it's fine, but it's not worth it.
Right.
And so safety around school buses, what can people remember?
Absolutely stop. Whenever you see the school bus there, the first thing that you'll see before it comes to a stop is the yellow flashing lights, and then as they come to a stop and the doors open, then you'll see the red flashing lights and the stop sign. So absolutely slow down and stop once you see that stop sign. If that stop sign is out, it means the doors are open and kids are moving. So that's the big safety concern there.
Very good. And social media, what should parents remember when, I know we're going like speed round here, but social media, what should people think, how should parents help maintain social media for their kids?
Just monitor it, do random checks. If the parent has Facebook as well, be Facebook friends with them. That way you can see what they're posting and stuff like that.
Yeah, and of course, biggest thing to remember about the dangers of social media.
That there's bad people out there, and social media is a tool that is commonly used to get to these children.
And what can parents do if their kid is walking to school by themselves or waiting at the bus stop alone?
Have a plan. Absolutely have a plan.
Yep.
Make sure that you have things like we talked about, little things that you can do, code words, stuff like that. Advise your kids to not get off the route, stay on the route that they're supposed to stay on. Because when they get off route, that's when things happen. So,
and that's important too, that if something were to happen to that child and the parent goes and reports something, they say, well, they took this route, they always take this route, but the kid might not have taken that route that day, right? Is that correct? So that helps with reporting cases as well and the investigation. Well, guys, just thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. This has been our City Talk, and just always remember safety around schools. That's our biggest thing. We want to keep these kids safe. We want to keep those drivers safe, but it's all about those kids. And parents, always make sure to talk with your kid about plans and social media, things that we've all talked about here. Of course, you can always contact our police department for any information that you might need. We're always here to help. And that is us for our City Talk.
We hope you enjoyed City Talk, a production of the City of Waco. Catch this program on local radio stations on Sunday mornings at 6:30 a.m. Find the podcast on your favorite podcast streaming service by searching City of Waco, or view it online at wccc.tv.